Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and today's episode of CN Unit Analysis, we are going to be taking a look at Tribbie, which is going to be the latest version 3 Harmony unit. But at this point of time, the videos have probably been going out. You guys have seen how her kit works, how she synergizes with different team comps, her Eidolon 1, Litecoin, etc. So I'll just be going into a little bit of the additional details from the CN Sarah. So in summary, you can kind of take a look at her base stats here. She's going to be a support that provides us with 24 res pen and 30% vulnerability, which is roughly 61 to 69% final damage increase depending if the enemy are going to be resistant to you, right? So this additional buffs, they can be benefited by pretty much any unit in the entirety of HSR right now, right? It doesn't matter if you're attack scaling, HP scaling, DOT, even super rate, they can all benefit from this. But despite that being the case, she's still definitely going to be a lot better compared to some specific units. So as an example, Runmei was pretty universal upon her first release at 1.6, right? She can be ran with pretty much every single team, DOT, hyper carry, break even, especially back then before super rate was a thing. But eventually, Runmei started to pivot into the super rate meta, and Tribbie is going to be a very kind of a niche as well as versatility, right? She's going to be able to work with everybody, but she's definitely going to be a lot better for some specific scenarios. Mainly for Tribbie, you can see that her DPS output against 3 targets is going to be at roughly 420,000, right? And out of this 420,000, 300,000 is actually going to be received by the main target. So the mobs are actually not going to be getting affected, and against a single target or even a double target, it's going to drop down to 180,000 or 290,000 roughly speaking, right? So as the number of targets goes up, then the Tribbie's damage is going to be going up. And then if you're not going to be using her with the signature Litecoin, then this damage output will be roughly 70% of what it's like for a signature Litecoin, right? Either Coggers or Danzanzas. So as a reference, you can see that a E0 S1 Aircron has a single target damage of roughly 400,000. You can see that Tribbie over the course of battle, the damage definitely ramps up by quite a lot, especially if you're going to be up against scenarios with a lot of different enemies. So as of this current moment, she's one of, if not the most universal support right now, not necessarily because of the fact that she has these universal buffs, but because of the damage that she's providing for herself, which can be outputted to pretty much any of the environments that we are facing in this current endgame, right? Specifically of Pure Fiction, Memory of Chaos right now, and most likely going to be Apocalypse Shadows when they release the future update, right? She is not necessarily a best in slot, for example, like if you want to talk about the synergy with Facial, but for almost every single support substitute, she's pretty much rank 1 or rank 2, which means she is going to be that versatile for Ying Li, for Facial. She might not be a very big increment, but if you guys don't really have their best of support, then she's absolutely going to fill that niche, right? Specifically for D Herta, she's absolutely considered the absolute best support as of we have right now before Anexa is coming out, because her kit just basically perfectly synergizes with D Herta with regards to the energy regeneration, multi-targeting, as well as the smart targeting from the ultimate, additional damage, all of them targeted towards the body, right? So it is going to be a pretty big increase. But one thing to consider that right now, D Herta is already really strong, as you guys would have put for her, would have known by now. All of the scenarios in Memory of Chaos, Pure Vision, they are basically catered for Big Herta to shine. So you might not even feel that big of an impact whether or not you have or do not have Tribbie. So in the future, when we see that the D Herta's performance is going to be falling off next time, when they pivot away from D Herta and maybe to pivot for casters or Nexa, then you can see that the increments from Tribbie is going to be a lot more obvious, right? Because now, when D Herta is no longer the strongest unit for every single endgame, then increments provided by Tribbie is going to be a lot more apparent, right? And one very important thing to note for D Herta users who are considering of pulling for Tribbie is going to be the fact that Anexa is going to be coming out in version 3.2, also going to be a Wind Erudition unit. So at this point, we can only guess what he does, but as of right now, you could say that Anexa should synergize pretty well with D Herta, unless he's going to be another brand new Erudition DPS that doesn't really act as a support. So whether or not he's going to be very synergistic, we kind of have to wait for his kit. And one unfortunate thing is that you can't really know whether or not Anexa is going to be synergizing with D Herta, because by the time we know what Anexa does, especially in 3.2's live stream, then Tribbie's banner would have already expired. So players are in a little bit of a predicament as to whether or not should we be pulling for Tribbie or should we be pulling for Anexa. But generally speaking, in CN's opinion, getting at least one copy of E0 S0 is not going to be a bad investment, specific not just for D Herta, but for the environments that you guys are going to be facing in all of the AoE content. Tribbie is absolutely going to be performing very well in, sometimes even outperforming units like Robin because of the energy regeneration not being that big of a problem, right? Aside from that, you can see that some of these different team comps specific to Fei Xiao and Aglaia, like Fei Xiao with Robin or Aglaia with Sunday, you can say that they're going to be way more synergistic, and really have them, then the importance will not be that high, right? Because specifically to Robin, you need a lot of attack frequency as well as attack percentage buffs. But in the future, if you're going to be seeing other units such as HP scaling My Day or even Cassius, then Tribbie might be even more synergistic than Robin, which kind of brings us to the point of whether or not should you be putting for Tribbie, not just for Dioda, but basically for any team comp that you guys are going to be putting for, especially going forward into version 3.2 as well, right? So very likely to be the case of the prediction is going to be the fact that Tribbie and Sunday, they are going to be sort of like the new era of version 3 supports that will be supporting the version 3 DPSs, and they are going to be more synergistic compared to Robin supporting units like Fei Xiao or even Aircron, right? So that's kind of the prediction that we are going to be going to see over here. And then Robin, if you guys are ready to prove her, she's still going to be a excellent slot for your follow-up team comps specific to Fei Xiao as well as Tobias, right? She position is not going to change that much. You could say that whether or not Tribbie outclasses Robin in these would maybe depend on how the endgame environment is going to be designed for Memory of Chaos. Because if you are going to be seeing a lot more evolution content, such as for AoE scenarios for your follow-up team, then Tribbie might even give us a little bit more of an edge compared to Robin, right? So as of this point, getting an E0 S0 Tribbie using Dungeons is going to be a very safe investment alternative. And if you guys want to kind of future-proof Tribbie a little bit more, especially if you are free to play, they kind of don't really want to change for too many units, then getting the E1 is going to be a very good investment value. This is pretty much one of, if not the best value Eidolon ones, and I'm pretty sure you guys have seen from now the $1 versus $2,000 in my early access review. This E1 is absolutely diabolical in terms of value, right? So just to summarize how the E1 works once again, you can see that if we are going to be doing 10 damage to 5 targets, then the E1 allows us to basically deal additional 12 true damage to the main target, which is going to be pretty much 120% damage increase for the main target, right? So this is going to be up to 60% increase in single target, and even if there's going to be a 1-to-1 benefit ratio to Robin's E1, then it is pretty much at least a 24% damage increase, just like how Respan works, right? So 1 plus 0 is going to be a very valuable Tribbie, and even for destruction targeting such as E2 Dale or even Jing Dale, it is going to be a very good damage increase in terms of this E1, right? So yep, I think at this point we don't really upgrade the E1 too much. Very valuable. Then Signature Light Cone, not that important because you do have Dungeons as well as even Coggers to increase the ultimate uptime. So in terms of the Signature Light Cone comparison with Dungeons and Coggers, you can see that the Signature Light Cone is more or less like an addition to increase Tribbie's personal damage. But for Dungeons itself, the team-wide action value advance, as well as the fact that Tribbie does have a very fast ultimate recharge, especially against 5 target, you could say that the value from DDD could be even higher than Signature Light Cone 1 if you're able to clear in a 1 cycle faster, right? So that pretty much depends on the environment that we're going to be using Tribbie in the team, right? So not as much of an importance compared to Eidolon 1. Also want to consider the fact that in 3.2 we are going to be getting Cassius, which is going to be the anniversary DPS, so you might want to consider saving a bit of Stellar Jades for that unit, right? So that was pretty much it for the summary of Tribbie. If you guys want to take a look into a more in-depth version for the talent skills, exactly how her kit works, kindly check out the early access review, and then we'll jump straight into some of the additional analysis from the CN community. Alright, so the very first thing that we kind of want to talk about is one of the most interesting questions. How versatile truly is Tribbie? She is versatile, but in terms of versatility, there are also going to be limitations, not really because of her kit and being a universal respan vulnerability, but just that there are better supports than Tribbie specific to each individual team as we see right now. So you can see at this current moment, she provides us with a team-wide damage increase, high attack frequency, as well as a personal damage output. So in this case, the team-wide damage increase is pretty much an unconditional trigger condition, right? She's pretty much 100% uptime on both the vulnerability as well as the respan. You don't really need to care about, like for example, units like Robin, where you need to have a lot of additional hits to get the ultimate uptime up. For Tribbie, she really doesn't really care about everything that much because she's pretty much 100% because the energy efficiency is just very low. Whereas for personal damage, it's going to be a lot more dependent to both her teammates as well as the environment. The more evolution targeting her teammates have, or the more targets there are for Tribbie's team to attack, then her personal damage will likely go up as well, right? So in order to kind of fully utilize this, you might not see that big of impact if you're going to be up against a single target scenario. But as of this point right now, the only person that can really make use of this, the best abilities, is going to be D-Herta. For units like Fei Xiao or Yunli, the follow-up attack is not going to be as impactful as compared to D-Herta. So as of this current point, a E0 Tribbie for a best in slot support is currently only going to be D-Herta, right? best in slot is different from versatility. Best in slot just means that you don't really have any other alternatives, like for example Sunday, Robin, or even Rame, that can do Tribbie's job better. So in this specific scenario, her best in slot is going to be Dihirda. You could consider her to be usable, right, viable in other teams such as Fei Xiao, but she will not be best in slot, right? That's pretty much it. So for example, like Dihirda, 24% res pen, 30% vulnerability is going to be a 61% final damage increase. If they do have a 20% res against your element, then it's going to go up to a 69% final damage increase, which honestly, if you want to compare this with other supports like Sunday as well as Robin, it might not even be seen as that high, because one thing that Tribbie doesn't really have is action value advance. So you can see that the term of damage amplification, her caliber is roughly going to be the same skill as Runmei, whereas for units like Robin and Sunday, they actually amplify our damage by a lot higher because of their action value advance, right? So you can see both of them right here can be at least roughly 100% final damage increase, which is going to be quite high compared to Tribbie, right? But of course, this is not accounting for the fact of Tribbie's personal damage, right? So even for single target damage such as Jingyuan, you could see a higher damage increase, especially when you pair with Sunday. But when you use a slot 2 as a Tribbie, then you can see the damage increase going up, especially if you're up against every edition content. So for the comparison with her, can be seen as Mimi, right? Remembrance Trailblazer as the slot 2 support. She will not be the best in slot, but she's gonna be a very versatile slot 2 to pretty much go with any of your team. Except the difference between Tribbie as well as your Remembrance Trailblazer is that Tribbie's buff is applied to the entire team as well as her own personal damage, whereas for Remembrance Trailblazer, you need to apply Mimi to an individual target specifically. So you can kind of see this as a comparison. Dihirda's damage increase as well as Aglaea's damage increase compared to Tribbie, Sunday, Robin, as well as Remembrance Trailblazer. You can see that the amplification from Remembrance Trailblazer is extremely high because of the 50% true damage as well as the action value advance combined into one, right? But then for Sunday, it's going to be a roughly 87% for Aglaea, and then Tribbie is going to be a double 61.2%, and then Robin is going to be these numbers as per follows. One thing to keep in mind is that these are all essentially our attack scaling DPS as we have in the current moment, but in the future, for any HP scaling DPS, you could see Tribbie's value going up quite tremendously, because you can see that these Aglaea and Herda is going to be attack, and then these Tribbie as well as Mighty is going to be a HP percentage. And who knows what is going to be coming out in the future values, because the higher your HP is for the entire team, then the higher Tribbie's personal traits is, because her total HP actually scales up based on the HP from your entire teammate. So if you can see right now, roughly we get roughly 1,500 additional HP, but if the HP of our teammates goes up even higher, then Tribbie's HP can even go up 2,000, 3,000, or even 4,000 additional HP, which will make your kid feel even more powerful, right? So as we see, the very impactful thing right now is that the new version of DPS as well as supports, they are trying to break apart from the old version of DPS supports, such as DOT R-type, such as Robin's Fuller, because you can kind of see this as how Robin broke apart from the version 1 supports. Pretty much when Robin came out, every single unit could make use of Robin's kit because of the action value advance. But in the future, when we see units like Mighty, when we see units like Castries, which are all more HP scaling, we are not exactly too sure if Robin is still going to be able to keep up as the number 1 support class for pretty much all these future team comps. Because we see very clearly, Dihirda is already going to be benefiting the most from Tribbie. Aglaea is going to be benefiting the most from Sunday, and then Slot 2 is going to be Tribbie or Robin, and then Mighty, when he comes out, since he is going to be a HP scaling DPS, it is quite likely that Tribbie would also be the number 1 best in slot for Mighty specifically. And in the future classes in version 3.2, like Castries as well as Annexa, then who knows if Robin can still be the best in slot for their class, or is it going to be the version 3 support Tribbie, right? So that is pretty much for your considerations. So aside from her versatility as well as the best in slot classes, there's one other thing which is going to be unconditional full coverage. So no matter what kind of teammates you have, no matter what kind of team cons you're going to be building, her buff are pretty much going to be there for you 100% of the time, because her buffs are going to be tied to her own turn, right? Realistically speaking, as we have right now, we are pretty much guaranteed 2-turn ultimate for almost every single scenario we have. Even using Danzanzans or Coggers without a signature icon, you are guaranteed these 2-turn ultimates for pretty much every single team. So you do have this full buff coverage, right? So with all that being said, let's just jump into some of Tribbie's weaknesses, right? So for Tribbie's number 1 weakness, as we heard of this point right now, is that she doesn't have the action value advance, which we pretty much have for almost all of our Harmony supports, right? Sunday, Remembrance Trailblazer, Robin, as well as Sparkle. Even though Harmony is not Harmony, but you get what I'm saying, right? So the biggest downside of Tribbie Tribbie is lacking this action very advanced. So when it comes to the compensation for lack of this action very advanced, she does have high personal damage as well as the follow-up attack from your teams using their ultimate, right? So one thing to keep in mind is how much exactly is gonna be this damage. So let's just come and analyze this a little bit. So in terms of comparison for a single target, it is roughly 70% of Robin, which is 120,000 DPR. So for an AoE scenario, it's going to be roughly 210,000. But different teams are going to have different variations of how much Tribbie's damage is going to be doing. So we can't really ignore that one of Dihura's highest damage output is going to be coming from Tribbie's damage, Tribbie's energy, which all drives back into Dihura's kit itself. And another thing is to note that for Dihura's kit, such as using her with evolution teammates like Jade, Tribbie's smart targeting system, which is going to be the ultimate, she actually managed to combine all of the excess damage that would have been wasted on mobs into the main target, which is why you can see the smart targeting is going to allow us to consolidate our damage a lot higher, which means that the damage output is going to be pretty substantial. Right? But one very important thing to note that this additional damage that we are getting converted, it is specific to Tribbie's damage, right? Because this is Tribbie's additional health HP, and this is only going to be the case for E0, right? You can't really convert the excess damage that you get from your allies, which is gonna bring into our Eidolon 1 later on, right? So this Eidolon 1, it is pretty much gonna be the game-changing Eidolon 1 because you have now the ability to convert the excess damage from your teammates, not just Tribbie, to the enemy main target. So to expand this a little bit more, this is gonna be a specific segment tailored to Tribbie's Eidolon 1. So a single target multiplier, this is gonna be roughly 24% true damage, right? But now we actually apply all of these 24 damage, true damage, true to the main target. So in the scenario such as 5 targeting, you can see that whenever we do a 5 target scenario, you can see this 100, 100, 100, all of these additional 24% true damage, this 24% is gonna all combine into the main target, which will lead to a 220 damage to the main target and 100 on the remaining target, right? So in this scenario, you can see that this single target damage increase is 120% on the main target, which is going to be a lot higher because you basically don't waste any of your damage on the mobs and only focus on the boss itself. I've talked about it a lot in my early access, so I don't repeat that far, but essentially this Eidolon 1 is going to be very powerful for not just Dihura, but pretty much any of the evolution targeting is going to be receiving benefits from this true damage. So even units like Argenti, even units like Serval, even units like, I don't know, a Baby Herda, they can all gain these benefits because of the evolution targeting combines this AoE spread and focusing them into a single point, right? So any AoE damage capabilities like Jingyuan skill or ultimate, they can gain the benefit of Tribbie's E1, right? So you can consider this as a 质变星魂, which is pretty much going to be game-changing Eidolon. Even for destruction class such as inbuilt Rune, you also gain the benefit because the buff are going to be transferred into the main target, even though it's not going to be as obvious compared to an evolution targeting. We can pretty much say this Eidolon 1, in CN's opinion, is extremely powerful, extremely valuable, much higher compared to, in this case, the signature Lycon. So comparing this with the signature Lycon, you can see that she's not really a broken signature Lycon because we do have a good substitute from Koggers or Danzanzans, right? So because of the fact that we do have these substitutes, you can't really see that bit of a difference. But in terms of damage, the signature Lycon does provide us a lot higher damage, roughly 30% higher compared to Koggers as well as Danzanzans. And then with the 48% crit damage, you also give this to the entire team. But unfortunately, we are really getting a lot of crit damage buff, as you can see from Robin and Sunday. So this 48% crit damage might not be as valuable as compared to last time. So in this current scenario, Danzanzans at S5 is going to be very good for us, but most players might not even have S5 Danzanzans, especially for the casuals or players that just started out recently, right? So that's going to be a little bit of a down point. One bad thing is, unfortunately, they didn't give Danzanzans to her signature weapon banner, which is, you know, just a little bit unfortunate that they kept this to the Robin banner, right? So TLDR, Eidolon 1 is absolutely going to be way more worth it than the signature Lycon. Relics is really not too much to talk about, right? 4-piece pro is going to be best in slot. In the 2-piece, you can either go for Luxaka or go for the brand new Bone. Luxaka is going to be really good for our current attack scaling DPS, but in the future when we get HP scaling DPS, it might not be as significant anymore. Me personally, I do prefer the 2-piece Bone because it increases Tribbie's damage by quite a decent amount, whereas for the 4-piece Poyo, it's still going to be there for the invaluable 32% crit rate, right? So that is going to be there. In terms of the other role, which is going to be the high-speed Tribbie, I've also talked about this in my early access. 4-piece Ego, 2-piece Von Weg, the speed breakpoints are roughly either 141 speed or 135 speed. Me personally, you can just go for the 135 speed and ensure your 3 actions on wave 2, and that is pretty much it. Keep in mind, you are going to be losing 20 to 30% of Tribbie's personal damage if you're going to be running for the Eagle 4-piece, so if you cannot clear the cycle fast enough, you might just go back opting for the 4-piece player just for increase in damage, right? And then if you want to also consider the fact that you are chasing for the speed, since you're going to go for high speed Tribbie, you're going to be sacrificing your crit subsets, then with the addition of the lack of crit subset or even HP main stats, then your damage will go up to 40% reduction in damage, which, like I said, it might not be that good, especially if you cannot clear the cycle fast enough, right? Then team-wide damage output is going to be decreasing by roughly 8 to 12%. So even if you're not going for the 4-piece Eagle, DDT can still be applied for Tribbie because her energy rotations, her energy increments are going to be more reliant on the teammates instead of herself. So even if you don't have 4-piece Eagle, her ultimate R time is still going to be really, really high, as you have seen from my early access previews, right? So that's pretty much going to be that. And a quick little note, these are going to be the specific speed thresholds if you do want to run her with the 4-piece Eagle, right? So for the first line over here, it's going to be Robin ultimate within 3 turns, 136 speed. This is going to be the first round, 1 ultimate every turn is going to be 141.3 speed. Then this is going to be the second wave, 2 ultimates with 3 turns is going to be 135 speed, which I explained before. Then every single time your dance goes down by 1 super imposition, you want to plus 1.6 speed, right? So if you want to cater this accordingly for players that do not have an S5 DDT. So now we can kind of talk about Tribbie's current team comps that we have tested in the CN side of things. So as of this current point, she pretty much performs very, very well with a lot of team comps. Current best in slot is still going to be with D Herta, but as you have right now, she's basically replacing the slot of Remembrance Trailblazer. Now for Remembrance Trailblazer, because the buff is going to be so high, especially the action very advanced, she's gonna be very, very good for players that are gonna be knowing what they're doing, especially if they control Mimi to do the action very advanced to the full capabilities. But for players that don't really want to care about it that much, for a full auto battle comfort as well as just versatility in the environments we are facing for all of the erosion content, then Tribbie is gonna be better than Mimi in this regard, right? At the same time, Tribbie's increment in D Herta is also gonna be stronger than Robin, and the main reason for that is because our entire team's attack energy frequency is not gonna be as high compared to units at full up team comps, unless we're going to be using a specific tech like Gallagher Quick Protocol to kind of cover for Robin's ultimate downtime. And the current Memory of Chaos, as well as even Pure Vision, you might not feel the energy downtime that much since we do get a lot of additional source of external energy, right? But in the future, if you do run out of energy with Robin, then it is going to be a big problem, and Tribbie is not going to be facing that. So prospective in the future D Herta team comp analysis, especially when I'm going for the multi-targeted DPS, for this current point, you can see that the Remembrance Trailblazer is going to be a very, very good buff for D Herta because this current slot 2 erosion is too bad, right? It's a vegetable, right? It's too noob. So the amplification from Tribbie might not be as obvious when we want to compare it to the slot 2 erosion. But in the future, if we get like better and stronger erosion units that are going to be tied to the slot 2, then you can see that the damage increment is going to be a lot higher when we swap out Remembrance Trailblazer for Tribbie. And even if the next side is not going to be the slot 2, eventually, most likely, they are going to be releasing an erosion to be tied up with D Herta, since she is going to be the emanator of erosion, right? So in this kind of scenario, then Tribbie is absolutely going to be performing a lot better compared to Remembrance Trailblazer because RMC's buffs are mainly tied to a single DPS, where Tribbie is going to be applied to the entire team, right? And speaking of the entire team, even the sustain slot could even see some additional erosion targeting, erosion damage, and etc, etc. And then if you do have an E1 Tribbie as well as an E2 S1 D Herta, you can essentially swap out the sustain slot fully for another erosion. So you're going to be having RMC Tribbie double erosion with D Herta and Baby Herta, and this team can pretty much full auto clear 0 cycle every single content we have in MOC 12 right now. But these are only going to be for players that are going to be considering on this extreme vertical investment. Then taking aside from the other team comps, so you can take a look at Facial team. So if you want to replace March 7 with Tribbie, you do not want to take away Robin, right? Robin is still going to be too crucial for Facial specifically, but if you want to take away March 7, you could see a potential synergy with Tribbie plus Robin with Facial, right? In this specific setup, running the 4-piece Eagle 2-piece one with Dance could be a pretty decent alternative, so she acts as a action value advancer for Facial indirectly, as well as the additional follow-ups for Facial, right? For Aglaya, this is only recommended if you have at least an E1 Aglaya. If you do have an E1 Aglaya, Tribbie could still work with her, but her synergy with Sunday is going to be a lot higher, right? So that's going to be the case. And then for the Super Raid team, she might not be that good of a replacement because she doesn't really have a lot of toughness bar damage compared to units like Harmony Trailblazer. Unless you're up against a quantum weak enemy, then that would be a pretty decent alternative. For DOT team, it could be used, but it wouldn't be the best in slot. For units like Yun Li, the additional damage we're getting from Remembrance Trailblazer and Robin is still going to be a lot more synergistic, so she can't really fit in and replace either of these two options, right? But if you do not have have Robin, then consider running Ringly with Tribbie, but your RMC still needs to be there, right? All these are gonna be essentially your E0 Tribbie, and then if you do unlock the E1 Tribbie, then you can unlock a lot more interesting ways. So for example, if you want to unlock a E1 Tribbie with Acheron, the additional damage in terms of this is gonna be even pretty nice for both first and second half of Memory of Chaos. And then for Argenti, her ultimate also works very well with the E1 Tribbie since it's always gonna be a multi-target content. So this smart targeting true damage is always gonna be focused on the boss as well, right? So unfortunate thing for Argenti is just his numbers are just a little bit too low, but you can consider something fun. You could even consider running a crit DPS link shot with this E1 Tribbie just to increase all of our damage, but it's something for you guys to consider, right? And now finally going into Eidolon analysis, I don't really think I need to talk too much about this E1 anymore. We already know how absolutely diabolical this is. So it is a roughly 24 to 72% final damage increase of pretty much your entire team. So very good Eidolon 1. Then for Eidolon 2 is going to be increasing your damage 120% for the original count as well as one additional count. So in terms of an example over here, you basically guarantee a 2.4 against single target, increasing her personal damage by roughly 30 to 40% in this 3 target scenario, right? So that's quite nice for personal damage. For 3 and 5, it's going to be 4%. Damage is going to go up by 14%. And then for Eidolon 4, it's going to be 18% defense ignore. Very straightforward. So the more defense ignore sources you stack on, the better this is going to be, right? So under no defense ignore, it is going to be a roughly 11% final damage increase, which is still going to be quite decent for an Eidolon 4. And then finally for Eidolon 6, 729% follow-up damage. Then this is going to be pretty much the standard E6 because the main DPS, break some very fun stuff. Just like E6 Bubbin, it's going to be a very good DPS. You want to go for the whale, right? So at this point, E1 S0 is going to be the best value for Tribbie if you guys considering a vertical investment, followed by this E1 S1, and then can consider E2 S1, E6, and so on and so forth, right? So with that, we have come to the end of Tribbie's CN analysis. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below if you're going to be putting for her or investing in her in this kind of different teammates, especially when we want to consider in the future update for Castries and Nexa. It would be a little bit of a concern as to should you be putting for Tribbie or Nexa, especially for a D Herda team, right? But generally speaking, the usage that we can see in the current endgame content as well as the team comps, it is going to be a very safe bet to get at least an E0 S0, if not an E1 S0, right? So word of the day is going to be AOE. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, and join Twitter. All the best for your gadget fools. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.